right. Well, welcome everyone to Amphibian Week 2022. I'm really thrilled that you're here, and we're really excited to celebrate amphibians and their conservation today with you and with our partners at Amphibian Foundation. My name is Kerry Wickstead, and I help as the state agency's coordinator for the Partners of Amphibian and Reptile Conservation. And so we have a great network of folks that are all dedicated to amphibian and reptile conservation all across North America and even in other countries too. So we're really, really excited to have so much interest and involvement in our herpetofauna here. So today we have a really special activity planned for Meet an Amphibian Day. We were going to meet some of the amphibians at the Amphibian Foundation live with Amanda Dahlgren. And so Amphibian Foundation is one of our partners, and I am going to turn it over to Amanda and let her tell you all about herself and her organization, and then start showing you some cool amphibians. So thank you.
Hi guys, I'm Amanda Dahlgren, and I'm the lead educator here at the Amphibian Foundation. I'm actually standing in our amphibian lab right here. So this is a lot of our frogs behind us. And it sounds like we're gonna have a nice background. We've got some dart frogs that are singing very excitedly today. So that should be fun. Hopefully I'll be able to hear them all throughout the lesson today. But yeah, so I'm the lead educator here at the Amphibian Foundation. So that means that I do a lot of things like little kids' birthday parties, school visits, field trips, events like this, just anything where we're getting to educate people about amphibians and reptiles too. That's what I get to do. And it's super fun. I love teaching people about these super cool animals. I've been working here for just about a year now. It's going to be a year sometime this month. And it has just been super, super fun. So I'm going to get into some animals in just a minute, but I want to tell you a little bit too about the Amphibian Foundation first. So we're in Atlanta, Georgia. That's where I am right now. And the Amphibian Foundation is a nonprofit that works to save endangered amphibians. So the main amphibian that AF was founded to work with is the frosted flatwood salamander. If y'all aren't familiar with them, you should definitely look them up. They're super, super cute. And y'all may have heard, we actually managed to breed the frosted flatwood salamander in captivity for the first time ever at the end of last year, which was super, super exciting. We work with them, we work with striped newts, we work with gopher frogs, all kinds of endangered amphibians from the southeastern United States. And then we do all kinds of education and outreach programs too, just to be able to raise people's awareness of these super cool animals. And the website for the Amphibian Foundation is in the chat there, so if anyone wants to check it out. And then at the end, I'll tell you a little bit more about some of the programs that we have. So the way I'm gonna do this with our animals today is I'm gonna start with frogs, and then we're gonna go into salamanders. So I'm gonna show you all these cool animals. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about them, and then just kind of give you a minute to look at them and appreciate how cool they are. We're gonna keep everybody muted during this part, so if you have questions, just keep them in mind, put them in the chat, or just hold on to them. And then we're going to do like 15 minutes at the end for everyone to ask their questions. If you have any about amphibians in general or about the animals I'm going to show you today. One thing I do want to start by saying before I start bringing the amphibians out is just a little bit about what amphibians are. So amphibians are a group of animals. They do get lumped in with reptiles a lot because they are also cold-blooded like reptiles, but they are a separate group of animals from reptiles. And they have a couple things that make them distinct. One being that most of them are going to go through metamorphosis. So for example, a frog, as a lot of us know, is going to be born or hatch out of its egg as a tadpole that's going to be fully aquatic. And then it's going to go through metamorphosis where it grows its legs, loses its tail, and comes out on land to become an adult frog. And then most salamanders are going to do that as well. Amphibians also have what we call semi-permeable skin. So that means that things like water and air can actually sometimes go through their skin and into their body. So one thing you'll see is that there's going to be a little bit of a pause between each animal because I'm going to sanitize my hands really thoroughly between animals to make sure that nothing is being transmitted from animal to animal. That, you know, if I get some slime on my hands from one frog, I'm not passing that off to another frog. So that is just kind of a quick overview of amphibians, and then we're going to get into some specific ones. So I'm going to start off with some hand sanitizer real quick for our first frog, and I'm going to show y'all one for our first frog that I think is really popular. I had to use this guy because everyone loves these frogs. I'm sure you'll recognize him. So our first critter today is going to be a red-eyed tree frog. Let's see. You see him opening his eyes for you there. So these guys are super popular because they're just so beautiful. I'm hoping that he will cooperate and not take a flying leap across the room here. But these guys are super cool because their defense strategy in the wild is camouflaged. So when these guys pull their legs in and close their eyes, they pretty much look exactly like a leaf, both in color and shape. So they can blend in really well by just sitting on the leaf of a tree. But then when they're up and moving around, they've of course got those big red eyes that give them their name. Let's see if this guy will show you. They've got that bright blue coloration on their sides and those bright orange toes as well. Yep, he just jumped onto my computer screen. So that is what we call flash coloration, which is a typically hidden patch of bright color that an animal could show to a predator to try to scare them away. Don't jump, buddy. Back onto the computer he goes. All right, so I'm gonna try to get this guy to pose nicely for a minute so y'all can appreciate just how beautiful he is. These are definitely some of my favorite frogs. It's really hard to pick because I really just love every frog out there. But these guys are just so spectacular and so beautiful.
This was definitely one of my gateway frog species,
right?
There. And there are a lot of people, Vanessa's calling it beautiful and Cindy's calling it wonderful. And yeah, just those colors and those feet.
Popular frogs. Yeah, those gorgeous feet. These guys are really good climbers. They've got those sticky toe pads so they can climb up trees really, really easily. These guys do live in the rainforests in Central America. And like I said, they have that camouflage to blend in with leaves on trees. So they're going to go up into those trees where they can sit on the leaves to hide from predators during the day and then be out hunting and looking bright and colorful at night.
Do you know what some of their main predators are?
So these guys, see, a lot of animals are going to eat just about anything they can fit in their mouths. So these guys are going to be predated by a lot of different animals, but you know, things like birds are definitely going to go after these guys, larger amphibians, things like that.
Thank you.
Just love that bright blue side with those stripes. Now, another thing that I love about these guys, and of course he's got his eyes open right now, so I'm not going to be able to really show this, so you'll just have to trust me on it. But when these guys close their eyes, they actually pull their eyeballs kind of into their heads. They're not protruding like they are right now. And they have what's called a nictitating membrane, or third eyelid, that covers about a third of their eye, and it lets light still go into their eye while their eyes are closed so that they could see like the shadow of a predator approaching. And it actually helps cover the red of their eye that would still be visible because it has a pattern like the veins of a leaf so that it helps them continue that leaf camouflage. These guys are super, super cool. All right, I'm gonna put him back and move on to our next frog now. And yeah, Kerry just posted in the chat, but if y'all have any questions at all about this guy or any of the amphibians as I bring them out, please put it in the chat and we can answer them in a minute.
So you do have a question from Naya. Does this work similar to how lizards have another light sensitive eye on the top of their head when their eyes are closed?
Yeah, very similarly, because you know, like with bearded dragons, for example, they're going to have that third eye that doesn't really see the way an eyeball would, but it just senses light so they can tell if a predator is coming from above. It's a very similar idea. They're asleep, so they're not really seeing, but they still get that sense of light coming into their eyes so that if there were to be the shadow of a predator, they could wake up and get out of the way. All right, let me get our next frog ready. So we're going to go into another frog that has some really cool camouflage. This is one of my favorites. I'm probably going to say that about every animal, is that it's one of my favorites, but I picked some of my favorite animals for today specifically. right. So this guy is a Vietnamese mossy frog. And you can see where that name comes from because he literally looks like a patch of moss, both in his coloration and his actual texture of his skin has that nice bumpy effect to make him look like moss growing on, you know, a log or a rock or something like that. So he can blend in very, very effectively. He also has big sticky toe pads. You can see they're sticking to my finger very effectively. These guys, as the name indicates, are native to Vietnam, and then they do also live in China as well. And one cool defense mechanism that these guys have is they will actually curl up and play dead if they are feeling threatened. You can see that nice moss pattern that he has, and it even continues onto his eyes there.
That's just a wild looking frog.
Isn't he?
So there's a question in the chat going back to the red-eyed tree frog from Gary. Yeah. And he wanted to know what's the best type of feed to use in captivity.
Gotcha. So with any smaller frog like that, it just kind of depends on the size. So for our smallest frogs, we're going to use fruit flies, and then for larger ones, crickets. So these guys are probably kind of on the line where they could eat fruit flies or they could eat smaller crickets. And then our bigger frogs are going to get larger crickets.
Okay. And so would that include your frog that you're holding there too?
Yes. So he, I think, typically is going to eat like smaller crickets.
Great. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that face.
Isn't he cute? I love the frog smiles. All right. And if anyone has any questions about this guy, again, feel free to put them in the chat for me. And I'm going to get my hands cleaned and get ready for our next frog here. Right. Like I said, I'm going to say it every time. Another one of my very favorites here. Right. So this guy is a tomato frog. And you can probably guess where that name comes from. She basically looks like a big angry tomato. So these guys I love because they just always look angry to me, which I just find hilarious. I like to say that they look like some kind of cartoon supervillain with those angry faces, but they're just big blobby red frogs that look like tomatoes. So they are called tomato frogs. Now this one I'm holding here is a female, which you can tell because of the brighter coloration and the spots on the chin there that she's showing off. The males are actually a lot duller in color. They're not quite as colorful and bright. And they're also a little bit smaller. These guys are native to Madagascar. And this is actually one of 3 species of frogs that are all in the same genus, but that all have this tomato-like appearance and are all called tomato frogs. So another thing that these guys do as a defense mechanism when they feel threatened, and she's doing it a little bit because she's not too thrilled with me holding her, is they puff up their body with air to try and make themselves look big and scary. I mean, I personally don't think she's ever going to look too scary, but you know, I guess if I was a bird trying to eat her, maybe she would. Another thing that they can do is actually secrete a substance from their skin that will actually numb the eyes and mouth of a predator that's trying to eat them to make the predator spit them out.
That's wild. So there's a question from Naya, and she wants to know, do all of these frogs have the nictitating membrane or just the tree frog?
Not all of them do. So I believe there are other species in the red-eyed tree frog that have it, but that's the only one of the ones I'm showing today that has it.
Great, thank you. Yeah, look at that big old body.
I've also seen these guys online compared to cheeseburgers because of the kind of yellow stripe over the brown stripe. Looking like a bun, slice of cheese, meat, and another bun.
I can see that. And Nancy's asking, do they have glands that secrete like the parotid glands, or is it just all over the skin secretions?
So with a non-toad frog, like all the ones I've shown so far, it's mainly going to be all over the skin. And then with the toads, which we are going to look at in a little bit, those are going to be the ones with those parotid glands that you're mentioning. And I'll make sure to show you those when I've got a toad out for you.
There's a lot of interest in this frog. So Gary also wants to know, do they ever emit that toxin in captivity?
So they definitely could. So she really doesn't understand the difference between me demonstrating, holding her out on camera here and an animal trying to eat her, unfortunately. So it is definitely possible that she could do that, if she felt threatened. I think that that's mainly going to be if they're like getting chewed on. And since I'm not chewing her, hopefully she's not going to do that to me. But also, since I'm much larger than an animal that would typically eat her, it wouldn't affect me nearly the same.
Don't chew the frog. Good.
I'm not planning on it. Yeah, that's a good thumb. Don't chew on frogs. All right, I'm going to put this angry lady back. Yes, Mark, my boss, he's the executive director of the Amphibian Foundation. He just said in the chat that I should resist the temptation to chew on the frogs. So I'm going to try really hard. I figure I've been here for a year and I haven't chewed on any yet. So I think I'm doing okay. All right. So next I'm going to show a really cool frog. I'm not going to hold this guy because he is actually fully aquatic. So I have him in a little container of water here. Hopefully y'all will be able to see him okay. Of course, he's going to turn and stick his butt in the camera. Every time I turn his tank, he turns to face away. But hopefully y'all can see him without too much glare. This guy is a Lake Titicaca frog. And these guys are so weird. I love them. They have these big folds of skin that y'all may not be able to see. Unfortunately, it does look like there's more glare than I was anticipating. But these guys are fully aquatic frogs. They live in Bolivia and Peru in the wild. And like I mentioned earlier, they have that semi-permeable skin that things like oxygen can go through. And that's actually how these guys breathe. So they use their skin to absorb oxygen from the water. And so they have big folds of skin to increase the surface area that allows that oxygen to go through their skin for them to breathe. So they're super cool. This guy is a little on the small side. I don't think these guys are fully grown yet. These guys are actually one of the largest fully aquatic frogs on Earth, and they can actually get up to 8 inches long. So really, really big. And these guys do typically live in very cold water in the wild as well. I thought this was very interesting. They actually like water that's between 45 and 65 degrees Fahrenheit. So very, very cold.
It's probably trying to get away because you just talked about eating.
Yes, he's like, no, don't eat me.
Now, is that an adult-sized frog there? Or
No, I'd say this guy's probably got some growing left to do. Average adult size for these guys is in the 3 to 6 inches range, so he's got a little growing still ahead of him. Right. Him out of the way.
And that was the Lake Titicaca frog?
Titicaca frog, yes. And that's the name of the lake area that they are native to.
And Patrice wants to know, could you comment on the use of gloves when handling frogs and other amphibians to protect them from bacteria and chemical residues?
Gotcha. Yes. So definitely you want to be really careful handling amphibians. Honestly, I do like to use gloves. Part of the reason I am choosing to use hand sanitizer instead today is just so I'm not using up our very valuable time here with, expensive glove changes. But as a rule of thumb, that is a good way to go. But what I've done is just made sure that my hands are super, super clean. I was also cautious today before I came in here to not, let anything get on my hands that could be super harmful, like, bug spray, sunscreen, anything like that. And then when I'm using the hand sanitizer, the biggest thing I'm doing is making sure that it is completely dry. There's no wet sanitizer on my hands when I touch them, just to minimize the risk of any of that transmitting into their skin.
Thank you.
But yeah, it is a good rule of thumb to use gloves, definitely.
And one plug is on May 17th, the PARC Disease Task Team is going to be giving a webinar on Field Biosecurity 101. So for folks out doing research and things like that in the field and want to know the best practices, we'll have that information out soon.
That's fantastic. All right, so I am going to bring out our last frog of the day now, and I very intentionally saved this one for last. You're gonna love her. Let me grab her real quick. This is Duchess. Duchess is a cane toad. And as you can see, she is a very, very big cane toad. So actually just today, I was doing a little last second research just to make sure I was remembering all my facts correctly. And I saw that the largest cane toad on record had a 9.4-inch snout to vent length. And we know this girl's pretty big, so we decided to measure her to see how she compared to that record holding toad. And before I tell you, actually, I am going to say, if you want to put a guess in the comments for what her snout to vent length wound up being, and I'll tell you a little more about her in the meantime, because I would love to see what some guesses are. So like I said, Duchess is a cane toad. Cane toads are native to Central and South America, but back in the early 1900s, they were introduced in both Florida and Australia. The reason they got the name cane toad is because they were used to eat bugs, various pests that were destroying sugarcane crops. So they're cane toads because they were protecting the sugarcane. And they did their job very effectively, and actually too effectively, because not only did they eat all the bugs, they then reproduced like crazy and are now extremely invasive. But these guys are also just super cool animals. All right, I see a fantastic guess of 24 inches. I wish. But she's wonderful. We love her. And we talked earlier about the difference between toads having carotid glands for their toxins and other frogs that have it throughout their skin. You can see those huge carotid glands right here that I'm touching. So those are her poison glands behind her eyes. So those are just giant glands full of poison that she could secrete if she felt the need to. So these guys are highly toxic. It's not a toxin that's going to affect me by holding her, but I am certainly not going to lick this toad. That would not be good. She's definitely one of the more toxic ones we're looking at today, but she's one of my favorites. She's awesome. All right. And I've got some great guesses. I'm gonna go ahead and reveal the answer. So she measured in at exactly 9 inches in snout to vent length, which makes her only 0.4 inches shorter than the record holding cane toad. So we just figured that out a few hours ago, and I'm just very excited about this information because we have just the coolest cane toad ever, in my opinion. She's very calm. Like, she's kind of kicking me right now, but compared to the other frogs we looked at earlier today that kept like taking flying leaps onto my computer and things like that, she's pretty content to hang out and be handled.
You had a lot of really good guesses in the chat.
Wonderful questions. But yeah, I just was so excited to find out just how big she is, because I definitely wondered, but this was the first time, at least to my knowledge, that we had actually measured her and gotten an exact number.
And Gary would like to know, is there a rule of thumb size per individual adult frog and the size of enclosure you use to humanely raise them in captivity?
Gotcha. So it does depend on the species. So something like a cane toad, you would want a much larger floor plan as compared to, say, a tree frog, where you're going to want something taller. So it definitely does depend pretty heavily on the type of frog. You know, if you've got a frog that is going to just be hopping around on the ground like Duchess, then, you know, you're going to want to give a decently large floor plan. I don't know if there's necessarily a rule, like you mentioned, for, you know, this many inches of frog equals, you know, this many gallons of tank space, or, you know, this many square feet of tank space. But just as a rule, it's always good to go bigger rather than smaller. But then again, with something like a tree frog, you're going to want to go with a tank that's taller as opposed to having more floor space, because they're going to climb more than utilize that ground space.
Thank you. And Sue would like to know, how old is she and how old do they live?
So I am not sure how old she is. I'm not sure if we know. I know Mark's listening. Mark, if you have an idea of how old she is, if you would put that in the chat, I would appreciate it. All right, Mark says unknown. I figured that was probably the case. But they typically in the wild are going to live 10 to 15 years, but they have been known to live up to 35 years in captivity. So these are pretty long-lived toads, because most frogs do tend to have a much shorter lifespan than a lot of other animals.
That is a pretty decent age.
Yeah.
And there's a question from Nicole. What do cane toads eat in the wild?
Pretty much if they can fit it in their mouth, they will eat it. So the main things are definitely going to be invertebrates, insects, things like that. But then they'll eat rodents, they'll eat reptiles, they'll eat other amphibians. They have actually been known to eat things like birds and bats as well. So it's really just, if they can eat it, they will.
If it fits, right?
Yes, that is pretty much the motto of a cane toad.
And Trish would like to know, who is singing so nicely in the background?
So that, I'm not 100% certain, because I don't recognize the call off the top of my head, but I'm having to go by where it seems to be coming from. And I noticed, oh, I'm actually seeing him calling right now, so I know for sure now. So that is a Philippides vittatus dart frog. They are these really pretty dart frogs. They're black with kind of teal legs and orange stripes on their back. But yeah, I did just look and I was able to actually see the male calling with his vocal sac going. So now I know 100% that that's who it is. All right, so I'm going to put Duchess back, and then we are going to move on to our salamanders. Right. I just have some little travel boxes on the back of the table behind my computer, and she was very determined to climb out of that box and not let me put the lid on it. She was like, "No, I want to be on camera. I'm the star of this show." All right. So our first salamander today is going to be a tiger salamander. And these guys are super, super cool. They're one of my favorites. Again, I'm saying it again. So these guys are native throughout the United States. They're definitely more common from what I've seen on the eastern side of the United States, but they're all over the place. And they are also one of the largest terrestrial salamanders in North America. So you can see this guy's got some pretty good size to him. Where are you going, buddy? And one thing that I find really interesting about these guys is that they live most of their life underground. They are really mainly just going to come above ground when they need to breed, but they're predominantly going to stay burrowed underground. And they don't really have claws, which is a question I get a lot for digging, but I can feel as he's walking around on my hand, he has like hard toes to dig with. These guys are just really cool. And these are an Ambystoma salamander, and they are really loyal to the pond that they were born in, which I find really interesting. So these guys will travel a fairly long distance to make sure that they lay their eggs in the exact pond that they actually were in as a larvae and as an egg.
So does that mean if you find a salamander crossing the road, you shouldn't move it away from where you find it? You should just help it across the road?
Yeah, just like a turtle, just help it in the direction it's going, make sure a car's not going to hit it, but it knows where it's going. It's got a specific place in mind that it wants to be.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Oh, and I see one question there in the chat, the largest salamander in North America, that would be the hellbender. So they're super cool. If you're not familiar, they are like the Lake Titicaca frog that I showed. They've got those big folds of skin to help them absorb oxygen from the water, and they can be at least 2 feet long. And they're a fully aquatic salamander. They're really cool. They're probably my absolute favorite, but it's hard to choose. See, how much time do you spend on average with each individual critter as you're making rounds, checking on, feeding each tank? That's a really good question. So we have so many animals here that would just be a pretty much impossible job for one person to do. So we actually have a team of volunteers that comes in 3 days a week to take care of the animals. So each volunteer will have like a set day that they come in and work with a set group of animals. And that allows us to spend more time with each individual animal. It does still vary, from animal to animal, and some of them want us to spend more time with them than others. We have one snake in particular that just really, really loves attention and will beg to come hang out with people when his tank's being cleaned. But just having, that team of volunteers taking care of the animals definitely helps be able to provide more time with each individual animal. All right. I'm going to put this guy back and get ready for our next salamander. All right, hand sanitizer. All right, so the next salamander that I'm going to show you is actually kind of a cousin of the tiger salamander we just looked at. So this is another Ambystoma salamander. This is a spotted salamander. You can see where that name comes from. A nice black salamander with bright yellow spots. These guys live throughout the eastern part of the United States and Canada. They're super, super cool. So these are another salamander that will migrate from the area that they live most of the year, where they are going to live underground, and then they're going to migrate to the pond to breed. Typically that same one that they themselves were born in. And there are some incredible photos out there of the migrations of spotted salamanders, where you will see just thousands and thousands of these guys all migrating on the same night together. It's just incredible. I know there are actually some places where they will close roads that they know are in the path of the salamander migration on the nights that the salamanders are migrating, to make sure that they're not getting run over as they migrate. These guys are also really unique in that they are the only vertebrate that's known to actually have a symbiotic algae with their embryos, which I just think is so cool. I got to see some spotted salamander eggs earlier this year, and the egg mass will actually look green because of the algae that grows not just in the kind of gelatinous substance around the eggs, but actually within the embryo itself too. It's really cool. And I see a herp underpass. I think there are some roads that either have like a tunnel under them or like a bridge built over them with something kind of funnel the salamanders into that safe area so they're not going across the road.
Naya has a question. What's the best way to get into working with wildlife as a job or volunteer work?
Yeah, so it really depends on, where it is that you're wanting to work. Like, the thing that I can speak to the best, of course, would be, if you were interested in working somewhere like here, I started out as a volunteer myself. I actually originally interviewed to teach summer camp here, and then I asked if I could work as a volunteer in the meantime. And I started out working in our squamate lab, so working with our reptiles, working with our snakes and lizards. And so just, reaching out and saying, hey, I'm interested. Is there something I can do to help? And just showing that initiative is always just a really great way to start and just get your name out there. And then even if there's not something right then, maybe, just the fact that you showed that initiative will help them remember you in the future too.
Thank you. And I would also like to know, what's the purpose of that symbiotic relationship with the algae?
So that, I'm going to be completely honest, I am not entirely certain what the purpose it serves is, but it is just this really, unique thing that's not really seen with other animals. So I'm not sure if that's something that's like still being studied or if I just haven't seen the answer myself. I'm sorry. I wish I had a better answer to that particular question.
And Gina has mentioned she's seen algae and wood frog egg masses as well. Do they also have that symbiosis?
So as far as I'm aware, that would more just be on the outside of the egg mass and not actually within the embryo itself. But I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that that's just going to be more external as opposed to internal. Oh, and thank you, Mark. He did say algae feeds on the embryonic waste and provides the embryos with oxygen. That makes sense. So that's in the chat as well. Thank you. And going back to the volunteer stuff, he also pointed out there are currently 36 staff, volunteer students, and interns working in the collections and helping take care of the 670 animals at AF. So like I said, we've got way too many animals for one person to be able to give them the attention they need alone.
And Gary would like to know, do your captive raised salamanders become more active when their wild brothers and sisters are moving to their vernal pools or seasonally breeding?
So some captive animals will kind of react to that kind of thing, but typically it's not going to be nearly as extreme if they do react at all, because typically what's going to give them the cue that it's time to migrate and to breed is going to be changes in temperature and changes in weather. So things like the weather warming up and rain will be typically what cues the spotted salamanders to start migrating. And of course, when we're keeping them in captivity, we're keeping the temperature pretty stable year round. And of course, it should never be raining in here. So they're typically not going to get those same cues that the wild ones would get. Right. All right, the next salamander I'm going to show you is going to be a rough-skinned newt. So these guys are really neat. These are very toxic. They have a very strong toxin and they are native to the Pacific Northwest. So what I find really fascinating about these guys is that they coexist really interestingly with garter snakes in the Pacific Northwest, where these guys are super toxic and pretty much nothing can eat them and survive except for garter snakes. So some of the garter snakes actually adapted to be able to withstand the toxin that these little guys produce and started eating them. So then the newts started evolving a stronger toxin to try and combat that. And the snakes got better at eating them with the stronger toxin. And they are in what I have seen referred to as a co-evolution arms race, with each one trying to kind of out-evolve the other to beat their competitor in this race, which I just think is so fascinating to be able to see, this kind of smaller scale evolution happening on a really short timeline with these guys. Another thing that's really interesting with them is they've got this dull kind of brown color on the back, but then you can see on their bellies that bright yellow orange color. And if these guys feel threatened, they're going to actually show that color to kind of try to startle or scare off a predator. And the way they do that is they'll actually flip their head back and their front arms back and curl their tail up so that they almost form a circle with their belly pointing outwards to show off that bright coloration. And that color is just advertising, hey, I'm toxic. If you eat me, you're going to have a really bad day.
And Gary would like to know, do you change the tank temperatures and such when you when did you successfully raise those first captive bred salamanders?
So I believe so. I know in the salamander labs, those salamanders do have their own room that's dedicated just to them. And they've done a really good job of trying to basically replicate their native environment, their wild environment, as closely as possible. So that's basically a big part of it, has just been trying to give those salamanders the feeling of actually being out in the wild so that hopefully they don't even realize they're in captivity. I've got one more salamander for us to look at today. And this guy is super cool. Some of y'all may have seen him before. I know I had never seen the salamander before I started working here. This guy is an emperor newt. So this species of salamander is native to China. And you can see they've got this really bright orange on their body that really stands out against that black. They're just so beautiful. And just like the bright underside of that rough skin newt, that is meant to demonstrate just how toxic they are. These guys are also very highly toxic. And these little orange bumps that you can see down his sides are actually poison glands. And if he felt very threatened, he could actually use the ends of his ribs to push the toxin out through those bumps. So these guys are just really unique and just such gorgeous animals. I love the contrast between the dark black body and just the neon orange. Spanish ribbed newt. Yep. So we do have a tank of ribbed newts here, and that's something that they're definitely known for. And these guys do a similar defense. All right. So that is the last of our salamanders. Now I do have one more very special animal that I'm going to show before we're done. So really quickly before I show that, we've talked about frogs and salamanders, and those are the main groups of amphibians that everyone is typically familiar with. But there is actually a third group of amphibians that very few people have ever heard of. Now, y'all that are, aware enough about amphibians to be here today may know exactly where I'm going with this. But that third group of amphibians is Sicilians, and they are super, super cool. So here in Atlanta, we don't have any Sicilians native. They do pretty much just live around the equator, but we are lucky enough here at AF to actually have a few Sicilians, and I have one that I am going to be able to show y'all today, which I am super, super excited about. Let me get him for you. So here is our Sicilian. So he's not an earthworm, believe it or not, even though he does kind of look like a giant earthworm. This is a type of amphibian. So Sicilians are legless amphibians. Most species are going to be either terrestrial, they're going to burrow and live underground, or they're going to be fully aquatic. So this is a burrowing Sicilian that we have here. And then we do also have a tank of aquatic ones as well. This species here can get up to about 16 inches long and is native to Central Africa. Now, one thing that's really unique about some species of Sicilians, including this one, is that they do provide good parental care. The mothers will care very closely for their young. The way they feed them is the baby Sicilians will actually eat the outermost layer of skin off of the mother's body. And I'm not sure if it'll really be easy to see on camera here, but you actually cannot see any eyes on this guy because this species has eyes that are actually under a layer of bone. So they are effectively blind, which they don't really need their eyes because they do live underground where it's pretty dark. There's not much to see. Oops, it's peeing on me.
Amanda, isn't there a fancy science term for eating that mother's skin?
There is. Yes, there is. I should have written it down on my little cheat sheet. But yes, there is a fancy science term for it.
Perhaps Mark can chime in the chat. Yeah. Maternal dermophagy. Yes. That's it. Thank you, Mark.
All right. So that is the last animal that I have to show you today. We've got about 12 minutes left. So I want to just leave a little bit of time at the end here for questions. So please go ahead. Let me know any questions that you might have. Oh, cool. Gary, I see that you took the Master Herpetologist course. That's awesome. I took it too. It's so fun. I'm definitely going to talk about that a little bit at the end.
All right, if anybody has any questions, you can type them in the chat, and I'm actually going to allow you to unmute yourself as well. So you should be able to unmute yourself now if you want to ask any questions too. And I guess while we're waiting for questions, could you let us know a little bit more about the Master Herpetologist program?
Absolutely, yeah. So the Master Herpetologist program was actually my personal first introduction to the Amphibian Foundation, and it's a class takes place over, I believe, 16 weeks, and it covers all the groups of herps. So all groups of reptiles, all groups of amphibians, and teaches all kinds of wonderful information about them. It has lectures from experts all over the world. You know, every topic it's given by experts in that field. And so it's just really thorough, really wonderful. And we run that twice a year. It's fully online. And yeah, the link to the page on our website about the Master Herpetologist program is in the chat there. I would definitely recommend checking it out. And then at the end of the program, if you pass, you do get certified as a Master Herpetologist, which is super cool to be able to have that like little diploma that says Master Herpetologist, you know, frame it, hang it up on your wall. And then you get to brag to all your friends that you're a Master Herpetologist. But you really do learn so much wonderful information. It's just really, really thorough and well put together. So I highly recommend it to anyone that wants to, you know, expand their knowledge of herpetology.
I learned all sorts of cool information from taking it.
So much, so much.
Like, I didn't even know that crocodiles like hunt with sticks. So to get birds to try to grab them.
Crazy stuff that you would never expect, because there are some really fascinating animals out there. So yeah, it's a fantastic course. And I'm not just saying that because I work here. I mean, like I said, that was my first introduction to the Amphibian Foundation. When I took that course, I had no clue I was ever going to wind up working here. I just genuinely really loved it.
And Linda has a question about the Sicilians. Could you tell us a little bit more about what they typically eat and how long they live?
Yeah, so they are typically going to eat invertebrates. So since this species at least is under the ground, they're going to eat a lot of insects that are also going to be under there with them. So things like earthworms, anything that they can kind of run across while they're burrowing under the ground. And then how long do they live? I think a lot of them are going to be in like 10 to 15 range, but it's going to vary with species. A lot of them are not super well studied, it seems, because they're hard to find. So I think a lot of them, they're not 100% sure yet either, based on what I've read.
Thank you. And Gary would like to know, even though you think all of these are really awesome, have you named your favorite tree frog that you care for? And if so, which frog and what's its name?
So I don't think I personally have given a name to any of the frogs that we have here. But I know this isn't a tree frog, and I know you specifically said tree frog, but I've just got to say Duchess is my favorite frog here, and she's definitely the one, you know, one of the ones with a name. Now, a lot of our frogs, we do have like a large number of pretty much identical frogs, so a lot of them we can't really tell apart to name, but definitely some of my favorites to watch in here are going to be our glass frogs. So they live in this like lower row that you can see behind me here, just tiny little see-through frogs, and you can see their organs. I actually was able to record a video the other day of a glass frog sitting on the glass of the tank, and you could see its heart beating through its chest. They're just incredible to watch.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And a quick quick question. So do you have any programs for kids?
Absolutely. So, like I mentioned a little bit at the beginning, I'm the lead educator here. So a big part of my job is working with kids and some of the programming that we do there. So we do things like field trips and school visits and birthday parties. And then we also have every summer a summer camp called Critter Camp. And so that was my first teaching experience with the Amphibian Foundation last summer, was teaching Critter Camp. And this year I'm very excited because I'm getting to teach for pretty much the entire summer, but it's just such a wonderful camp. Each day of the 5-day week is dedicated to a different group of herps. So like day one is Salamander Day on Monday, and then it goes all the way up until the last day. We end on Snake Day. The kids, get to go out in the creek with their nets and look for salamanders. They learn a lot of information about these animals. It's a really great camp. So if any of y'all have kids or know kids that are in that 6 to 14 age range that would like to spend a week over the summer learning about reptiles and amphibians in Atlanta, it is a really wonderful resource. I'm really excited to continue teaching that. And it's like Kerry has just put the link to Critter Camp in the chat as well there.
I want to go to Critter Camp as an adult.
Right? Like, why didn't I know about this? Why wasn't this around when I was little? I would have gone every week all summer,
Yeah.
But even as an adult teaching it, it's so fun. And, kids just come up with incredible questions that you would just never expect. And they just really make you think. It's really fun. I feel like I learned so much through teaching the kids too. Oh yes, and as Mark just put in the chat, the Master Herpetologist program I was talking about earlier, we do also have a junior version for ages 12 to 17. So it's for kids that aren't quite old enough to take the full Master Herpetologist program yet, but still want that experience. There's the Junior Master Herpetologist program for them, and there's the link in the chat for that as well.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Amanda. This has been such a fantastic presentation, and I know I've learned a lot. So I hope you all enjoyed this presentation as well. And I hope you check out some of our other Amphibian Week activities that are happening. So I'll place the link in to Park Place in the chat in a second, so you can see the other Amphibian Week activities and resources and all of that. We have another webinar coming up on Thursday called Name That Amphibian, and it will be a California edition. So we can test your herp knowledge with California herps in that regard. So I hope you consider joining us. And if not, I hope you post some of your fantastic amphibian facts on social media and tag Amphibian Week. So hashtag Amphibian Week or hashtag Amphibian Week 2022. So thank you all again. This is recorded and we'll be sending that out once we get it closed captions.